The mystery of Raxxla in Elite Dangerous has remained unsolved since the game's release in 2014. The developers of Elite have said that it is in the game, but it seems that no real progress has been made in more than 12 years. Despite years of discussion, theories and research by the community, only little progress has been made, and with basically no evidence to suggest that one theory leads to Raxxla being found. In this video I will be presenting multiple theories that are based largely on in-game observations for those with eyes to see. I claim that my work is more well-reasoned than others, mostly due to the large amount of evidence which supports it, something I unfortunately believe the other Raxxla theories lack. I hope that this work will shed a new light on the search for Raxxla, and that this will lead to its eventual discovery. I too have spent several years searching for it, and this will be my final contribution to the mystery before I move on. This work starts by presenting how I believe the problem should be approached, then to multiple in-game observations I've made. These observations lay grounds to my theories and claims that I will present here in this video. The first being ocean theory, seeing the galaxy through seafaring from Earth. The second is Maelstrom theory, which is understanding what Thargoids and witch base is. And the third is examining the ghost world Raxxla and why witch base is haunted. The very last part of this video I will devote to try and interpret the Dark Wheel toast with these newly made theories.
I'll start off by defining my assumptions, which I think is a very crucial step in trying to solve a complicated problem. My three assumptions are: 1. Frontier Developments wants the players to find Raxxla. I base this off the fact that they've added the Dark Wheel and Raxxla Codex entries to the game back in 2018, and both entries actually seem to have plenty of clues that could help find either. 2. Raxxla cannot be found by chance, so randomly stumbling into Raxxla is assumed to be impossible just due to the sheer amount of star systems in the game. Furthermore, I also assume that Frontier have made some mechanism such that only someone who has actually solved the mystery can find it. And there's also a hint that, or hints from an interview with Michael Brooks, where he says that it's a journey that everyone has to travel for themselves. 3. Finding Raxxla requires mostly just in-game observations, not out-of-game knowledge. We already know that it's very likely that there are hints in the game, from like the Codex entries, and this means that trying to interpret hints from release trailers or similar I just find very unhelpful. So given these assumptions, it becomes clear that the best strategy is to 1. Find it the way Frontier Developments have intended. Trying to simply find it by brute force, or I assume to be impossible, and speculating on where it could be and so forth, it's just fruitless. And 2. Making observations from the game is the only way to solve the mystery. Frontier Developments have put hints in the game for us to interpret. Following this strategy, we start by looking the most obvious place, the Codex entries on Raxxla and the Dark Wheel, as they can be found in-game. It was what I did when I started, but like many players before me, it didn't result in anything beyond speculation. So I went back to making observations in the game. Many years ago, when I was trying to read the Quest to Find Raxxla thread on the Frontier forums, I stumbled across a post. Even though I haven't been able to find the post again, I still remember it clearly. It stated that Elite had several connections to classic seafaring on Earth. The author provided some examples in that we, the players, we fly in ships. Those ships can dock at ports, although they are named starports. You can be attacked by pirates that want to take your cargo. Since then, I found more references, namely that you can super cruise, like earthen ships cruise through the ocean. Capital ships and fleet carriers are terms, from seafaring. Both are directed by captain. And their classes are Farragut and Majestic and Drake, all referring to ships from the 1900s in either the US or British Navy. INRA means Intergalactic Naval Reserve Arm, obviously naval is seafaring again. The usage of these terms is perhaps not out of the ordinary, as many of the terms in aviation have been coined after terms in seafaring, so it could be the reason why it's done in Elite as well, and other space-related games have done the same. I do still find the ocean connection of interest, and I would later find the following references in the game. The human-occupied space is named the Bubble. Systems have nav beacons, just like navigation beacons on Earth. Honking sounds very similar to big ships on Earth. The most famous of the old worlds is lave, with lave meaning to wash or to flow along. A limpet is an aquatic snail. I've also encountered NPCs using like ocean-related terms such as fish and boil. There was a user on Reddit who made a collection of quotes from the game logs where you can see that this happens actually more than once. And maybe that was not enough to convince you fully, which I do understand. Some of these terms just fit quite well, and maybe they're a result of my confirmation bias, as I haven't shown you all the terms that don't relate to seafaring. But I do think this seems to be a general theme that is worth investigating. Remember that Frontier developments could have chosen literally any other word for, the bubble, or lave, or the fact that NPCs say both fish and boil. Once I had become familiar with the many references to seafaring, I started actively looking for more proof. I started noticing that many NPC ships have symbolic names, and at some point I found a ship named Whale Dragon, an interesting name considering all I have just introduced you to. The more ships I targeted and the more names I read, the more I realized that the names of the ships are not random at all. They have meaning. The name of a ship depends on what role it has, and by role I mean what the NPC of that ship is programmed to do. So the roles I could deduce are system authority vessels, passenger ships, and pirates, with each role having, their own theme of possible set of names. The so-called system authority vessels, they have names like Spear, Broadsword, and Peacemaker. This is also true for passenger ships, and pirate ships, they also have like their own set of fitting names. Where it gets really interesting is the names of the ships that seem to have neither role. I call them normal ships. These are ships that fly alone, and they seem to just be flying around. They don't have a mission, so to say. And during my many hours of playing, I have noted down every single name I have seen of these so-called normal ships, and what I've found has been quite the discovery. I've catalogued 150 ship names in total, and discovered that all names refer to one of 6 symbolic categories. I have made a pie chart showing how many names belong to each category. The first and most frequent category are names that refer to some ocean or water-related god, a myth or a deity. In here are 70 of the 150 different ship names. This means almost half. An example of a ship name in this category is Aesiona, a Gallo-Roman water goddess, Atrimpas, a Lithuanian god of sea and water, and Mazu, a Chinese sea goddess. So an additional 20 names actually refer to gods and myth that are unrelated to water, but seem to have no common trait. So this means that of the 90 names referencing gods and myths, 70 of them are directly related to the ocean or water in some way. And many of the ocean-related gods are from different religions, such as Roman, Celtic, Inuit, Egyptian, and Hawaiian. It is almost as if ocean-related gods have been cherry-picked from each religion, while many of the other gods from those religions have been deliberately ignored. Now again, Frontier could have named them, anything, but here we again see the relation to seafaring. Continuing, we have 7 names directly related to water. This could be names like Lurker in the Deep, Nautilus, which is an earth and sea creature, Gravity Wave, which is some kind of concept when the atmosphere and the ocean interfere, giving rise to wind waves, and Neris, which is a river in Belarus. Then there are 9 names which refer to earthly ships, such as Azov, a gunship from the Imperial Russian Navy in the 18th century, and Charlemagne, a gunship in the French Navy, also in the 18th century. Again, seafaring. The last and maybe most interesting category are the ghost ships, in which I found 30. Ghost ships are ships on Earth that are found drifting at sea with no crew. The crew has either abandoned the ship, are missing, or are found dead. These are also important as they referenced multiple times other places in the game, and some names I found in this category are Bella Mica, which was a sailing vessel discovered off the coast of the Mediterranean in 2006 with no crew, Palatine, referencing to the Palatine Light, is a ghost ship from the 18th century, and Sabrina, which is an 18th century vessel discovered aground on the coast in France with a crew missing. Very peculiar. I have to say that many of the names of both the earthly ship names and the ghost ships are names of old navy admirals or generals as well as kings. and some ships have probably been named, after these people. This makes it possible that the names are not referring to ships, but instead their corresponding admiral, general, king, whatever. But one of the names I did find was literally a ghost ship, which supports my claim that they do indeed refer to the ghost ships. Speaking of ghost ships, the ghost ship the Adamaster arrived in the Chakchan system back in year 3306 in Elite. Adamaster is a mythological character from the 15th century, and it symbolizes the dangers of the sea. It also has a sister ship named Hesperus, which is the name of an evening star. I'm unsure if there's a connection there. The last category are the unknowns. Here I found 14 ship names that I don't really know what category they fit into. I've listed them here, so maybe you can figure it out. All in all, I find these discoveries of great importance, as the names as well as categories are clearly far from random. Although, one thing I do want to emphasize is that the interesting aspect of this are the categories, not the individual ship names. Given that these names are shown to the player at random, it is unlikely that a single name is crucial in solving any mystery. It is very likely that players will never see certain names just due to probability. But if the categories are what is important, then players would still be able to put together the pieces, even if they didn't encounter all the names from each category. Looking at the categories, almost all of them has something to do with seafaring in one way or the other, be it ship names or names of the gods related to the ocean. Also, just the sheer number of names in each of these categories is wild, especially considering how there seems to be a focus on the ocean-related gods and not the gods of fire, mountains, or anything else. I find this a strong proof of the relation Elite Dangerous has to seafaring on Earth. I've decided to not show the entire list of ship names, as it has taken quite an effort to accumulate them all. But I encourage you to note down the ships of these so-called normal ships yourself. See if you can rediscover the categories, or maybe even find new ones that I have missed.
The normal ships can normally be found in nav beacons or starports.
My initial approach when collecting these ship names was actually to look in the game logs, but as you can see, the name of the ship is amongst the only attributes that are not logged. Everything else is there, such as the name of the pilot, their rank and their faction, but not the name of the ship. Whether this is intentional or not, I do not know. All I do know is that keeping the name out of the game logs prevents someone from figuring out all the ship names easily with a script or similar. It ensures that only players who pay enough attention when playing can discover the categories I've just shown you. If I was making a mystery in a game, I would also make sure that clues are not logged like they have done in this game. Moving on, I would like to discuss the book Elite Reclamation written by Drew Wagar, which was published around the game's release back in 2014. I recall that the author said that there were clues in the book, although I haven't been able to find the exact quote. I did find him saying that both the game and the book did contain clues in a Reddit Ask Me Anything from 2016. From this answer, I think it obvious that he deliberately put clues in the book. I know that the book was initially about the mystery of the Formidine Rift, but I have found others. I did say that my theory would be based largely on in-game observations, where this is the exception. Whatever clues that are found in this book will only be used to support my previous claim. The two books by Drew Wagar are considered canon, which is why I even consider them relevant in the first place. The story of Elite Reclamation starts in the system Prism. Although there is no source, it states here that Prism is a handcrafted system created to align with the novel. On page 32, the system Prism is described. It first describes the moon Chion, on where the main character lives, and that Chion is a moon of the Waterworld data line. Here it is from the book. Low in the northern sky, forever hanging in full view, is reflection sparkling in the bay was the enormous blue orb of data line, the ocean world. It was an enormous planet with seas of 100 kilometers deep. It hosted, so rumor had it, marine life of extraordinary size and might. Chion was data line's only moon, forever locked to its parent, always facing it. The sun came and went, but data line remained, marking the passage of time by its changing phases. It is written that Chion is tidally locked to data line, just like our moon is tidally locked to Earth. This means that the inhabitants of Chion can always see data line, this giant blue orb of water above them. In a way, their space and sky has become an ocean. And again, Drew Wagar could have made any configuration he wanted of the system, as we know it was handcrafted for the book, and yet he chose this. I have tried to use AI to recreate what this would look like for you to understand it better. Now, funnily enough, the wiki also states that the in-game planet Dataline is actually a high meta content world. When looking at EDSM and looking at the game, we can see that this is actually true. This seems like a huge oversight for a system that was literally handcrafted for the story. And after 12 years, Frontier developments have not fixed this. They surely must have gotten to know about the mistake by now. We can actually see that this is created as an issue, so Frontier developments, they clearly know about this. And as you can see, no one has actually answered this issue yet. Now, what does all of this actually mean? The many references to seafaring, the ship names being ocean gods or related to water and ghost ships, and the handcrafted system in Prism. If you ask me, I think that in order to solve Raxta or other mysteries in Elite, we have to view the game through the lens of seafaring on Earth. We sail in ships, we dock at ports, we trade and pirate, just like seafaring was done in the 18th century here on Earth. That's why there seems to be an endless amount of references to either ships, ghost ships, or myths from that time. In other words, we have to view space as an ocean, just like the inhabitants of Chion when they see the giant blue orb of Dataline hanging in the sky. Their sky has become an ocean, and so must ours. We are often encouraged to, go out there and blaze our own trail by Frontier. It's like the game slogan. And I think this is heavily inspired by how 18th century explorers went on voyages to discover new species and places on Earth. But instead of an ocean, we just get to do it in the Milky Way. And the reason why I think this shift of paradigm is so important is that it might put something like the codex entries of Raxla and the Dark Wheel under new light. Maybe the mother of galaxies is not Cassiopeia, but instead, a mother of the ocean, which our galaxy is. The one we're sailing in. And for good measure, here's a little more from the codex. If you still find this take unlikely, then I seriously don't know what to tell you. Watch the video again or simply look in the game yourself. I'm sure there are many more references to seafaring that even I have missed. But the sheer amount of proof is enough to convince me that this is likely the right approach. My next in-game observation was trying to understand what a Thargoid is. We have already established the seafaring narrative quite convincingly, if I may, so it would only make sense that a Thargoid would be something like a sea monster. Thargoids are able to hyperdict ships jumping from system to system. This would be the equivalent of being attacked by a giant sea monster when out on the open sea in your ship. The first reference to seafaring are Thargoid barnacle sites, where, a barnacle is this weird type of algae that grows in water, typically seen on earthen ocean ships. Furthermore, stations and ships that have suffered Thargoid damage seem to have what looks like green algae to me, just like the stuff that grows on ships on Earth, which I just showed you. Now, this is not conclusive proof, but I think of this as just another way that Elite is tied to seafaring. There are more places in the game that hint at Thargoids being from the ocean. In the story of the Adamastor and its sister ship Hesperus, somewhere in the storyline an anaconda named Proteus escapes and can be found as a point of interest on a planet. First of all, Proteus is a Greek god of the sea. Second, the anaconda has some logs that the player gets when you scan the ship. Here they are. Notice how they refer to the Thargoids as deep sea creatures found on the ocean floor. They also mention them looking like starfish, which is going to conflict with a claim I'll make in a moment. But I'll choose to focus on just the fact that they're mentioned in the context of being deep sea creatures. The word Proteus was also used in another context, namely at the start of the Second Thargoid War, when the Proteus wave was used in an attempt to wipe out all Thargoids from a system. Here, what I find of interest is the word wave in Proteus wave. Now, this weapon ended up backfiring massively on humanity. Of course, if the Thargoids are sea monsters, they of course cannot be killed by a wave. Also, just in general, the fact that Frontier called it both Proteus and wave is just another reference to this seafaring paradigm. So, what does this actually mean? I think that given that the seafaring paradigm is true about Elite, then Thargoids probably resemble krakens, a giant squid.
This is due to their odd similarities with squids, as all Thargoid interceptor variants have 8 arms or pedals, just like squids, and they also have multiple hearts, just like squids apparently have. And then you might ask yourself, if a Thargoid depicts a kraken, then what is witch space? You know, the place that they seem to come from or at least navigate through. And I think once you decide to see everything in relation to seafaring, witch space can be nothing other than the depths of the ocean. It's the place where Thargoids seem to thrive, just like the kraken thrive and live in the depths of the ocean. Both Thargoids and kraken can emerge from the depths into normal space, which would be the surface of the ocean, to hyperdict us in our ships. This theory is almost waterproof. We the players of course use witch space when we hyperjump from system to system, which would be the equivalent of traveling through the depths of the ocean. Maybe one way to understand this is that when we the players hyperjump, we're simply traveling, adjacent to the depths or on top of them, which is why we actually can move around in witch space and are locked into this corridor. That was quite a lot, and I do understand if you do not believe this yet, but just hang on. I have more proof of my claim, and I'll show you more on how I came to this understanding. My moment of eureka came when I noticed that Thargoids have so many references to Maelstroms, the whirlpools seen on Earth, not the ones in Elite, although that is yet another reference. To show you this, let's start by looking at the Thargoid surface sites. I have seen many people speculate these sites are all Thargoid titans that have fallen from the sky, or maybe Thargoid interceptors being grown. If you look at them, they do indeed look a little like a Thargoid interceptor, but I think they're a lot more spirally. The center part of the Thargoid surface site could indeed be an interceptor. Here you can see I've tried to overlay an interceptor to show you, and I think it is definitely possible. But if only the center part is a Thargoid interceptor, then what is the outer spiral? What does it add to the site? Why is it here? I think it is very clear. This is a depiction of a maelstrom. I mean, just look at it. So, in a way, the way you can see this is that there is a maelstrom and with a Thargoid interceptor in the center. This will become important later. So, now what does this symbolize? Here's my take. Thargoid interceptors are, kraken or squid, which can go back and forth from normal space to witch space, and the way they do this is through maelstroms. The reason why this makes sense is because maelstroms are known to drag, sailors to the depths, to the unknowns. They kind of pull everything down into the void. Just take a quick look at what happens to a Thargoid interceptor when it leaves normal space and goes to witch space, the depths. Yep, it starts spinning around rapidly right before it enters, just like something would if it entered a maelstrom. It's a little detail which does not really add anything to the gameplay, which is also why I think it's a clue, why I put this in the game. Why would the Thargoid interceptor else spin around before entering grid space? It just seems like an odd thing to add for no reason. Now, on a second note, the Thargoid interceptors also have these Thargon swarms that they deploy. I don't know what they are, but just look at how they move. Do you see the same pattern as the Thargoid surface sites? I think it clearly shows that they are depicting a maelstrom. Going back to the Thargoid surface sites, this is where it gets interesting. As you probably know, the more developed surface sites have this underground network that the players can enter. If we are to understand Thargoid surface sites as, these maelstroms, just think about what this means thematically. We, the players, are entering the center of the maelstrom, which is what the Thargoids are using to enter witch space, the depths. This means that we're almost entering witch space by going in here. Most people also know that if you bring a Thargoid probe, sensor, and link, and then place them in the center of this Thargoid device, you can see this stunning holographic star map. Star map is what they call it in the codex. So what is this star map at the center of this maelstrom? Because this map is shown in the center of the Thargoid surface site, you can think of it as being in the center of the maelstrom. It's like the maelstroms that the Thargoids go through when they enter witch space. So the only logical conclusion I could come up with is that the star map shows either witch space itself or the galaxy that Thargoids are from. Alright, so again, that was a lot to take in, and I hope you're still with me. Now that I have hopefully convinced you how Thargoids are interlinked with Maelstroms, let us look at the latest addition to the game, Thargoid Titans and Thargoid Maelstroms. The Thargoid Titans have, as we know, all been named after gods of storms and thunder. Therefore, the way I interpret this is it's like entering a storm at sea here on Earth, if we still use the seafaring paradigm that I've shown you. After all, we the players, we fly in ships when we enter these storms. Furthermore, all 8 Titans were surrounded by a Thargoid Maelstrom. Now, in my mind, this is a little upside down, because the Thargoid Maelstroms actually remind me a lot more of the storms at sea. Here I mean both what looks like to be clouds and fog, but also what looks like to be lightning strikes inside of it. And if this is the correct view, that the Thargoid Maelstroms actually depict the storms at sea, it would only make sense that the Thargoid Titans were the ones that depict the Maelstroms. First of all, they look like one, and second of all, Thargoid interceptors are able to enter a Titan's maw like a doorway, much like they're entering the Maelstrom when they're going to witch space. Thematically, it would also make sense that a giant Maelstrom would be in the center of the storm, and not the other way like it is here in Elite. Thargoid Titans have also been discovered to emit a strange signal. Here it is by Gallant News Digest.
Commander L. Bobbitt of the CX-8701 Reformation Project approached Cannon Research at 1500 yesterday, saying that they detected strange sounds in the wreckage of Titan Oya. Investigating the other 7 destroyed Thargoids revealed that they're all broadcasting the same signal. This recording, one of several, was made by Commander Lady Lucida. When fed through a spectrogram, tiles of curved shapes are revealed. When pieced together, originally by Commander Dest, these images make a picture.
Again, we see the use of the spiral symbol, which of course is a maelstrom. To me, this seems like the Thargoid Titans are trying to pull humanity into the depths, perhaps similar to what a deep sea creature would when it attacks a ship.
Going back to Drew Wager's book Elite Reclamation, I found more interesting stuff. I noticed that certain words were used a lot, specifically the words siren, snake and maelstrom. I knew that the word siren was important from the Dark Wheel toast in the Codex, and that maelstrom is a phenomenon from the ocean. Furthermore, the word snake we've also seen used before, from both the Dark Wheel novella as well as many ships being named after snakes. So I did a frequency analysis of Drew Wager's books, the 2 canon Elite books he did, as well as the 5 books from the Ulite Saga. So the Ulite Saga is a series of books that are based on Ulite. It's basically like a modern remake of the original Elite. And the books in the Ulite Saga are not considered canon, which is why I think one could use them to compare. Here is what my frequency analysis found, and here is how often those words normally occur in English text. Siren was mentioned 8 times throughout the books in Elite. That's 30 times per million words, when it should only appear 7.4 times per million words. And it was mentioned 0 times in the Ulite Saga. Maelstrom, on the other hand, appears 11 times in the books from Elite, and only 4 times in the entire Ulite Saga. In your average English text, this word should appear only 0.8 times per million words. And snake appears 7 times, which is 26 times per million words, when it should appear only 7.43 times per million words. This maybe isn't the most conclusive proof, especially since siren and snake both are words used frequently in Elite. Maelstrom sees a lot more use in the Elite books, but the author used this word in other books from before 2014, so I'm not too convinced that this is significant.
While I was making this video and watching this part of the analysis of the Elite Reclamation book again, I discovered something quite peculiar. As it is written, Daedalion, the water world that Xion is tightly locked to, was rumored to contain marine life of extraordinary size and might. Now, this seems like quite a big and unnecessary statement. After all, we know only of a few instances of alien life in the galaxy. So to introduce the idea of there being life, specifically marine life, on an irrelevant water world seems really strange, as it isn't used anywhere for anything. So not only is the book hinting at the fact that the sky, or space, is actually to be viewed as an ocean, as I explained earlier,
but it is now also saying that in that ocean there's rumored to be marine life of extraordinary size and might. Now this is very similar to the theory about how Thargoids depict deep sea creatures, like krakens. They're also considered marine life of extraordinary size and might, and the Thargoids are also rumored at this point. Remember that the book is from 2014, and the story therefore happens before humanity are introduced to the Thargoids. So the author Drew Wager has, with a small, unusual, and easy to miss description of a simple water world data line, basically told us how to interpret the galaxy in Elite. It's pretty interesting, I think. And now it also makes sense why Drew Wager used the word Maelstrom as much as he did, as we know that Maelstroms are tied to the Thargoids. Siren was of course also overused in his book, and if you search for the word Siren on the Canon website, you can find that the abandoned settlement Formadine Rift Alpha has the word Siren in its logs. Let me read it. There's some intro and then it says, "The lights in which space are coming for me, the lights, always the lights, they're calling to me a siren song." To fully understand what siren means, we first have to understand the mentioned lights in which space. Let's look at the Formadine Rift Gamma site. Here it says, "We're seeing some strange lights during hyperspace transits." And also it says, "More strange lights. We've got equipment malfunction, scanners dropping in and out, systems resetting, ship is limping on." From this it becomes pretty clear that these strange lights refer to the lights that the Thargoids emit, as Thargoids also cause equipment malfunctions and also they're from hyperspace or witch space. It is written similar in the Conflux beta site. So if these strange lights are referring to the Thargoids, then it would seem like that the logs from the Formadine Rift Alpha site are indicating that it is the Thargoids that are emitting this siren. Or so it would seem from these site logs. But I'll show you proof later on that I think the siren is also coming from witch space, but it is not being emitted by the Thargoids. Let's take a look at how the word siren is being used in Elite Reclamation and Elite Premonition. Here it is being described as a song of adventure, also as a song of venturing forth into the darkness, and at last a song of adventure to go beyond the limit of known space. In this context, I think it's used in a similar fashion to Fanvi, the wanting to go to a place one has never seen or been. Based on this, the Thargoids are probably not the ones emitting this sound. Elite Reclamation and Elite Premonition have now shown both to contain quite a lot of clues to things in the game, specifically by overusing words that end up being somehow important. Here I'm talking mostly about Dataline, the water world, but also the usage of the word siren. Remember that Elite Reclamation actually made use of the word siren before the codex entry with the Dark Wheel Toast was added to the game. Therefore the author couldn't just have taken it from there. So I started looking for more overused words, and I found two that I've also seen other places, which are haunt and specifically ghost. These words are also used way too much in the Dark Wheel novella from 1984, where haunt is used 5 times and ghost is used 7 times. If you know how short the novella is, you'll know how unlikely this is to happen by chance. Now remember earlier when I showed you the categories of ship names that I had catalogued from the game, I feel like we've seen why each category was included as part of the possible ship names. The only exception, of course, being the ghost ships. So what is so special about the word ghost and haunt? They seem to pop up both in the game and in the books. The Dark Wheel novella describes Witch Base as being haunted. It also says that in Witch Base there are the ghosts of the early ships that went in there and never went back. This, I think, is incredibly important. It also mentions shadows, which seems to be used with ghost. Both the books Elite Reclamation and Premonition use the exact same description of Witch Base, namely that it is haunted by the ghosts of the ships that first went out there and never came back. Now, I know that the original Dark Wheel novella is not considered canon by Frontier, which is why I think it's so odd for the author of Reclamation and Premonition to use the same exact phrasing. Maybe he used the same phrasing as the original Dark Wheel novella, which seems illogical since he would know that it isn't considered canon anymore. So it would only make sense that Frontier has either asked him to include this in his book, or he has used the phrasing because he knows that this part is still canon. Either way, there's something of significance here. Continuing with the Dark Wheel novella, it here says that when you kill the snake, you will lay a ghost that's haunted me for more than 5 years. Here the snake that is being referenced is the cobra that killed the father of the main character. It is also later being mentioned that the cobra has a ghostly image on the scanners. From this it's quite obvious that the cobra is a ghost that is haunting the character, or whoever it is after. Ghost and haunt is used in similar phrasing in the Elite Premonition book here. The reason why I'm spending so much time on this is because that in the Dark Wheel novella, Raxxla is being called a ghost world. And we know that the cobra which is haunting the main character is also being described as a ghost. The cobra haunted the main character's father because he figured out where the ghost world Raxxla is. Makes sense. So what's going on? I was very confused when I noticed this until I remembered that I had actually found 30 ship names referring to ghost ships in the game. Obviously it must be important, as Frontier developments have brought this detail over into Elite Dangerous from all the way back then. Why else create these 30 names of ghost ships? I think that understanding this will improve our chances at solving the mystery of Raxxla, the ghost world. The word ghost has been used only a single time in the knowledge base from the game. It is used in the page for the individual Pranav Antal. Here it basically describes Pranav Antal mentioning that he wants to incorporate a digitized memory of a deceased person into a simulated version of that individual to make a data ghost that the living can interact with. The phrase data ghost makes a lot of sense because this is basically like talking with the ghost of a dead person. Using the term data ghost is not very common. Now, this is a far stretch, but if and only if the concept of data ghosts is related to the ghosts guarding the secret of Raxxla, the Dark Wheel novella, as well as the ghost ships in the game, is that maybe what they are? We know that in the early age of interstellar travels, many ships went into witch space and never came back. But we also know that all that's left of them are the ghosts, and that is why witch space is haunted. Could it be that the crew of these ships were killed or somehow mysteriously disappeared, and somehow was made into a digitized memory, like the data ghosts mentioned in the knowledge base? Seeing this through the lens of seafaring, sailors of the early days of seafaring went out into the unknown, to the open sea, and were never seen again. Now only their ships haunt the seas, and their ghosts are crewing them. I think there actually is a striking resemblance to this idea, and it would make sense why Raxxla is a deadly secret. In the Dark Wheel novella, the ghost ship is haunting the main character's father for figuring out the secret behind the ghost world Raxxla. It is at least what he is shouting to his son right before the ship blows up. It is written in the Raxxla Codex that in several conspiracy theories, Raxxla is thought to have been discovered by some sinister cabal or soul tyrant. Is this sinister cabal the one which is controlling these ghost ships, and the ship that killed the main character's father? We know that in the early days of interstellar travel, many ships went into witch space. The crew of these ships were turned into ghosts by whatever was in there, and I think that this is the sinister cabal mentioned in the Codex. It is the ruler of the ghost world Raxxla, which is turning the ships who are lost in witch space into data ghosts. The sinister cabal is then using its fleet of ghost ships to achieve a covert dominance over humanity. Now it also makes sense why we see 30 ghost ships as ship names. So, this is where I need your help, if we are to test this theory. If the crew of the ghost ships have been turned into data ghosts, do the ghost ships that we see in the game have a pilot at all? When I catalogued the ship names, I didn't consider looking inside of the ships and checking if there actually were pilots crewing them. But now I'm curious. What are the characteristics of these ghost ships? Perhaps if we could confirm whether the pilot is missing from these ships or not, we can test if this theory holds. Now I want to go back to where I started, the Codex about Raxxla and the Dark Wheel. But right before I do this, I noted that the Elite Dangerous wiki claims something quite odd and at the same time very interesting in regards to what I've shown you so far. In the canon book Elite and Hear the Wheel by John Harper, it states that Alex Rider, the main character of the Dark Wheel novella, had two sons, Neptune and Oberon. Alex's father was named Jason,
So to name your two suns Neptune and Oberon is so odd that I could only consider it as a clue. And it is even more odd when we read here that Oberon wanted to find Suntil, the Thargoid homeworld, and Neptune wanted to pursue Raxxla. My theory so far has been that witch base represents the depths of the oceans here on Earth, and within witch base lies Raxxla, guarded by this sole tyrant. So it makes perfect sense that Neptune, the Roman god of fresh water and the sea, wants to pursue Raxxla, the ghost world of the depths of the ocean. To me, this is a confirmation that what I've shown you today is the correct way to interpret the galaxy. So what about his brother Oberon Rider, and what does this tell us about Suntil, the Thargoid homeworld? Oberon is a king of the fairies in medieval and Renaissance literature. He lives in the fairy realm, which is ruled by Oberon and his wife Titania, and then the mortal world where humans live. I'm unsure as how to this ties together with the Thargoids, and if actually witch base is this fairy realm mentioned here. I have of course already established the understanding that Thargoids are deep sea creatures, so the fact that he is called Oberon Rider does seem to contradict with this idea. So now that that's out of the way, let's move on and try to interpret the codex in the game, specifically just the Dark Wheel Toast. I would like to try and see if we can improve our understanding of it with the new theories of the game that I have presented. The general consensus is that the toast is to be interpreted as a roadmap, that is, a sequence of locations that we the players must go to in order to find Raxxla. Because it probably is a roadmap, the first line of the toast is the most crucial to get right in order to find the location of the next line of the roadmap. The first line reads, "To the jewel that burns on the brow of the Mother of Galaxies." Many players, including myself, have thought that the Mother of Galaxies is the Greek figure Cassiopeia, as she is the mother of Andromeda, which is our nearest galaxy. The next logical conclusion is to look in the Cassiopeia constellation, but to the best of my knowledge, none of the stars in this constellation have shown any importance. Furthermore, the toast says galaxies, as in plural, and Cassiopeia is only mother to one. Therefore, I discard this approach. I think that we can first begin to understand this toast when you see the universe through the lens of seafaring, as the ocean theory intends to do. This is perhaps why we have had no progress with the toast for so long. I mean, how can it be that thousands of players have not been able to solve it? I think it is because Frontier Developments wants to ensure that whoever solves this roadmap understands this seafaring paradigm that seems to be so central to Elite Dangerous. This could perhaps indicate that even the first line is supposed to be understood this way. Following this idea, the Mother of Galaxies becomes the Mother of Oceans. The galaxy that we fly around in our ships with depicts the oceans back on Earth. Therefore, I choose to view this galaxy as an ocean. Now, this Mother of Oceans could be a character from a myth, but almost every religion has some kind of Mother of the ocean or water, so I think that this could be a red herring. If you instead view this from a sailor's point of view, let's say from the 1500s, the Mother of Oceans would be Mother Gaia, or Earth. She would be the creator, or Mother of Oceans, that the sailors roamed, like we are exploring our galaxy in Elite. And I think that this is also quite symbolic. If you want to follow the siren song into the unknown, if you want to find Raxxla, what every explorer is longing for, you first have to come back to Earth and understand that it all started on the earthen seas, with ships exploring the seas and going places no one has ever gone before. So, the jewel that burns on the brow must therefore be the sun. Even though I am quite confident that jewel refers to a star, I am still unsure what brow means here. If this turns out to be the wrong interpretation, then perhaps the Mother of the Galaxies might instead be Tethys, the Greek god of flowing waters whose symbol is the winged brow. As it turns out, Tethys is a moon of Saturn in Sol, so whether the Mother of Galaxies is Mother Gaia or Tethys, the jewel that burns on their brow is probably the sun. The next line of the toast reads, "To the whisperer in witch base, the siren of the deepest void." Now, I have heard many say that this whisperer in witch base comes from the Thargoids, since they are from witch base, but I have found no proof that Thargoids actually whisper. Thargoids I only mentioned as having strange lights, as I showed you earlier, so this idea I will discard. With that said, the word whisper is used in an interesting place, namely at the very top of the codex entry for Raxxla. Here it says, "The legend of Raxxla has been circulating in whispers for centuries." It seems like that a whisper is to be understood as a story or a rumor that pilots tell each other. If you remember my previous statement about how I thought that Raxxla was a ghost world in Witch Base, this text from the Dark Wheel Toast matches that pretty good, I'd say. It also matches good with the second part of this line, which is the Siren of the Deepest Void. From earlier we saw how Siren was this song of adventure, linked to venturing forth into the darkness, and those who want to explore beyond the limits of human space. And if we remember ocean theory, then the deepest void is not a black hole or a place in the galaxy, but Witch Base, right? The depths of the ocean. That is perhaps the real void, which is also why it says deepest, right? In a way, the first and second part of this line, they mean the same. It is a whisperer of Raxxla, the siren of adventure to go to Witch Base, the depths of the ocean. It's the only true place that no one has been before, the only true limit of known space. So if the roadmap tells us to go to Witch Base in the second line of the Dark Wheel Toast, how does one actually do this? We know that in the early days of interstellar travel, many ships got lost in there, so perhaps we should try and do something similar. Or maybe we should do like the Thargoids by entering a Maelstrom. Perhaps our only chance of entering Witch Base was if we tried to enter the maw of the Titan that was above Earth. Unfortunately, this is where I had to stop, because I have no idea how to actually do this. The only thing I am quite sure of is that this is only possible in the system that the first line of the Dark Wheel Toast wants us to go to, which to my understanding is in the Sol system. Finally, to the third line of the toast, which reads, "The parent's grief, the lover's woe, and the yearning of our vagabond hearts." At this point I assume the player to have entered the deepest void, Witch Base, and all that's left is to find Raxxla. As I concluded earlier, Raxxla is controlled by this sinister cabal that is willing to kill anyone to preserve the secret. It does this with its fleet of ghost ships that it controls, like it did to the character in the Dark Wheel novella. And once these ghosts haunt you, that is kill you, you will be made into this data ghost, damned to crew your own ship. Knowing this, the third line of the toast makes a lot of sense. The word grief is typically used when you lose a loved one, and woe is a kind of great distress or misfortune. I think that what this means is that once you enter Witch Base, you will be haunted by the sinister cabal and its ghost ships to prevent you from discovering Raxxla. This is why your parents will experience grief and why your lover will experience distress. But it also says the yearning of our vagabond hearts. I understand this that even though searching for Raxxla might mean certain death, the longing to go to a place that you have never been to before is still greater. To sum it up, understand that the galaxy is an ocean and go back to Sol. Then somehow enter Witch Base, the deepest void, home of the Thargoids. This would be the same as going out into the unknown. Then once there, search for Raxxla in Witch Base. If you remember from earlier, when I was examining the Thargoid surface sites, I showed you how I thought that the galaxy map depicted either Witch Base or the galaxy that the Thargoids were from. Reviewing the Dark Wheel Toast, I'm increasingly sure that this is actually Witch Base, and that it is possible to go there. Unfortunately, I don't know how, but think about this. Why else would the developers add this Thargoid device and the galaxy map to the game? I think it shows us Witch Base because finding Raxxla requires us going there. The very last thing I want to talk about in this video is going to be my ideas on how to enter Witch Base, like the second line of the Dark Wheel Toast says. As I've told you multiple times by now, I see Witch Base through the lens of seafaring on Earth, and therefore understand it to be the depths of the ocean, the dark void. Now, we the players of course enter it temporarily when we perform hyperjumps using the frameshift drive, but is there another way we could enter it for real? Before I introduce these ideas, I'd like to state that they unlike the rest of the video, are not based on observations, but they're rather speculation. In Sol, the most interesting place is Neptune's moon, Triton, which is actually permit locked. My idea is that to symbolize entering the depths of the ocean, going to a moon named after a Greek god of the sea might be an idea. Of course, this would require getting the permit to Triton, which nobody currently knows how. Another way of entering witch space might be the same way as the Thargoids do it, namely through a maelstrom, as I showed that the Thargoid surface sites depict. But where can we find such a maelstrom in the game? An interesting thought is to think of black holes as being similar to maelstroms in the ocean. Black holes, they pull their surroundings inwards like maelstroms, and when something crosses its event horizon, it cannot escape again. Right? Perhaps much like the sailors back then viewed maelstroms. I imagine that this could have been an early inspiration of witch space, a place where once you go, you aren't coming back. The problem with this theory is, well, which black hole should it be? There are none in the solar system and none close by. Also, there are many black holes in the galaxy, and it wouldn't make sense that you could enter, only one of them, but not the others. The very last option I could see is if we zoom way out and realize that perhaps our entire galaxy is one giant maelstrom. Everything is being dragged inwards by the cluster of black holes in its center. To enter this maelstrom, one would of course need to travel to the center of the galaxy, and from there do something. Interestingly enough, there is actually a signal, or siren, if you will, being emitted from the galaxy's core. It's known as the landscape signal, and no one has been able to decode the signal yet. All three of these approaches have flaws, which is why this is an unfortunate dead end. I wish there was some way to validate what the solution to the first line of the Dark World Toast is, so that we at least could have something to go on. Perhaps there is another easier way to go to witch space, or maybe it's something else I have missed. This dead end is why I have decided to make this video, and as I said in the beginning, it will be my last contribution before I move on. Hopefully you can use any of what I've shown you, and if you want to discuss either of the three theories I've presented today, there's going to be made a channel in the Canon Gnosis Discord server for just this. So that was it. Thank you for watching the video. I know it was very long, but I really hope that you gained something from it. And I want you to remember that even though you might disagree on some of the later conclusions I made, I hope you remember kind of like the approach I did to it, looking in the game, making some observations before I draw any conclusions. And hopefully you can use these observations for something. Maybe I've missed something. I hope you will discuss it with me in the Canon Discord server. So yeah, that's all. Bye.